If your job at a healthcare facility includes disinfecting against viruses, you know prevention is the best medicine. And maintaining healthy spaces starts with a healthy cleaning routine. Grainger's world-class supply chain helps ensure you have the quality products you need when you need them. From disinfectants and cleaning supplies to personal protective equipment, so you can help deliver a clean bill of health. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high-quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. Now, you can find me at Opperman Investigations at Digital Forensic Consulting just by emailing me directly at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. We got another OJ show, okay? The book is just out, came out June 20th, 2024. OJ's Moon, Untold True Stories from the Other Side. And it's by a fellow named Brian Wedemeyer. But the book title, when you search for this on Amazon, it's B.T. Wedemeyer. Mr. Wedemeyer, are you there?
I'm here. How are you?
I'm good. I'm trying to keep dry. Okay, so
I heard.
I may need a lifeguard. Okay, come get me here.
Yeah.
Before we get into your book here, OJ's Moon, Untold Stories from the Other Side, tell us about yourself. Who is B.T. Brian Wedemeyer?
Well, I live in a little tiny town in very rural Arizona, right on the border between Arizona and California. It's called Parker, and I'm a principal of a little elementary school, which is not even in Parker. It's about 15 miles south on here. It's on an Indian reservation. I have about 200 kids that I serve, and they're in kindergarten through 8th grade, and that's kind of my life. I'm recently married, and I have a couple of kids, and older kids, and that's pretty much it for me. And, I'm a veteran. I'm the senior vice commander of our local VFW post, and I was a photojournalist in the Air Force. I served in Desert Storm very briefly, and that's kind of where I get my journalism experience and my writing background. Is I got that from the military, actually, and then I got out of the military and I worked at several small to mid-sized newspapers starting in Central California. And then I ended up moving out here to Lake Havasu City, and I was a reporter there for a long time. And then I eventually just decided to kind of switch careers and get into education, and I was a teacher and a coach for a while, and then eventually became the principal of this beautiful school called La Pera Elementary School.
Man, that must be so cool. 200 kids, man. Mr. Wedemeyer.
Oh, all day long. I love my kids.
Oh, man.
They're the reason jealous. I keep going back.
Yeah, I'm jealous. That would be a great way to end your career, man,
Right.
So anyway, you can meet Mr. Wedemeyer here, VFW 7061 VFW post there in Parker, Arizona. He's there all the time. He's there right now. Okay.
Yeah, I'm here having a beer, actually.
Okay. All right. So what about OJ's Moon, Untold True Stories from the Other Side? What inspired you to get involved with OJ?
So I got home from work one day, and I was folding some clothes, being a good boy, and I had this OJ documentary on, and I was casually watching it. I wasn't even really watching it that closely, and then something kind of got my attention. I've always been just a casual observer of the whole OJ case. I at that time, I knew about as much of the OJ case as probably any other person did, and I just had a question that popped in my head, and the question was, how did Ron get to Nicole's condo? and I in my memory bank I couldn't remember any references to what Ron was driving, or did he walk, did he ride a bike, or anything like that, because as the documentary was talking, it was talking about how, he was there to drop off some glasses that belonged to Nicole's mother. And I'm thinking, well, wouldn't his car be parked right out front? Did anybody check the car? Did they check it for prints? Was there anything in there? I'm pretty good on the phone with Google, so I got on my phone and started trying to find an answer, and I couldn't find it. So then I went to work, and I started digging at work and looking, through all these different articles on the web. Couldn't find anything, and the more I couldn't find anything, the more I wanted to keep digging. And I ended up looking through the court transcripts, and then when I did that, that's what took me down these other paths, like these crazy, bizarre stories, and then the journalist in me comes out, and then I'm making phone calls, and then it just spirals from there. Yeah.
Well, didn't he borrow a car from his roommate?
No, it wasn't his roommate. He actually was. He just started dating a girl named Andrea Scott, and she had a red Toyota, and she was actually out of town that weekend. But he offered to feed the dogs, her dogs, and she said, "Well, you can use my car while I'm gone." And so that was basically the extent of it. But the book really didn't. It turned so far away from that original question. It didn't even have anything. After a while, it didn't even have really anything to do with the question and the answer. It's just that's what started this whole thing for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to mention too. When I was looking this up, O.J.'s Moon: Untold True Stories from the Other Side. Great reviews, man. 4.5 stars. No complaints, and which is so tough with the true crime audience. Everyone has a complaint, and with this, everyone is so polarized with the OJs and the no J's and the pro J's.
Yeah.
So
I kind of thought I'd get a lot of both. You know what I mean? Just because that's how it. You're right. It's very polarizing with people. So, but yeah, I'm excited. I think it was what I try to do is like really. If you read the book, I'm not trying to lay a bunch of information and, trying to claim that I'm the OJ expert. But what I'm trying to do is it's kind of a memoir of sorts. So you're kind of on this journey with me as I'm discovering these things in the present tense. So you're going on the ride with me as all these things are happening and all these discoveries are being made.
And that seems to be the theme of the reviews, too. Immensely enjoyed it, very interesting, couldn't put it down, all that kind of stuff. Like, once people start, they can't get enough. So give us an idea. What's new in the book? You're late in the game, man. Like 20 years ago, What's new?
I know.
24 years, right? What's new in the book?
You wouldn't think you'd find new things, but I certainly did. The first thing that I stumbled on really got this going is if you read the depositions from the civil trial, and I decided to go ahead and kind of start with Kim Goldman's deposition because I thought she might have answers on what he was driving that night. So I kind of started with her. And in that deposition, the attorney is asking her about some guy, and the name is redacted several times. And as a reporter, like when I used to look through police reports and stuff, you get used to seeing names redacted. But as it's going along, whoever was doing the redacting actually missed one, and the name was Mike. And so now she's talking about Mike. I know the guy's name is Mike, and then it goes on further, and they ask what happens to this Mike guy, and she says that he was murdered and that he was shot, and she went on a date with the guy, and Mike actually knew Ron Goldman and got him the job at the Mezzaluna. And so I was fascinated by this, and then I was really fascinated that he got murdered during the big criminal trial. They were just on the verge of doing their closing arguments, and so I got on Google, and I'm looking for Mike, and I found this very short Wikipedia blurb about a Michael Nigg, N-I-G-G, who was murdered on September 8th, 1995, and he was shot in Hollywood. And then I just kept digging from there. Now I became fascinated with Michael Nigg and his case. I realized that I wasn't going to get a whole lot, but I decided to see if I could go through the LAPD door, and I got a hold of a guy named Rick Jackson, and he was a retired detective, and I found an article about him and how he helps crime writers and people that write scripts and things, and he helps them with their accuracy and makes it realistic and things like that. But I thought this guy might be able to help me because he worked at LAPD. Well, I got him on the phone, and he ended up, telling me, well, he didn't work there at the time. He wasn't familiar with the case, but he knew a lot of people down there still, so he offered to make some phone calls. When he makes the phone call, he gets a detective on the line named Scott Masterson, and he's the cold case detective. And when he makes that call, Detective Masterson is blown away because he literally has Michael Nigg's case file open on his desk at the call. So he was completely surprised. He's asking Rick, who is asking about this? And Rick, he didn't know me that well. He's like, well, I don't know, some school principal out in Arizona, and I was so excited. And then when I asked is Masterson willing to give me an interview? He said, yeah, and he gave me his number. So then I did the interview.
So who is Michael Nigg, and what's the cause of his murder?
So Michael Nigg, he's from Colorado. He's a native of Gunnison, Colorado, and he moved out. He started in Santa Barbara, and he, just like Ron Goldman, he wanted to be an actor, a very handsome young man, and but he was working jobs to make ends meet. At the time he was murdered, he was working at the Sanctuary, and that's where Pamela Anderson met Tommy Lee, and that he was working there at that time. He had just left the Mezzaluna to take the job at the Sanctuary, and he's on a date. He's on a date with a girl named Julie Long. They're very much in love, and they are going to the El Coyote restaurant. Are you familiar with that one?
No, I am not.
The El Coyote?
No.
So the El Coyote is this really famous Mexican restaurant in Hollywood. It's where Sharon Tate has her last meal. It's if you walk in, there's pictures of all kinds of Hollywood stars and everything. But he's on his way to dinner. They can't find parking right away. It's a Friday night. It's pretty late. It's around 10. He pulls the next street up, which is Poinsettia. He parks his car into the parking lot behind the art store, which is across the street from El Coyote. And he parks his car, and he starts to get out, and two men approach. They want money, and he ain't giving it up. And there's a scuffle, and then there's a shot, and they shot him in the head, and then they took off into a car across the street from the parking lot, up the street a little bit in the residential area, and there's a driver, and so the three men get away, and it was a random homicide, and I'm 100% do not believe it had anything to do with the O.J. case. But unfortunately, there's a lot of conspiracy theorists out there that want to try to link Michael Nigg's case to the O.J. case.
Were these shooters ever caught?
There were 3 arrests that were made, and that's another interesting tidbit here. They did arrest 3 suspects. One of them even confessed, according to the police report. I was not able to find or interview those suspects. I did get their names, but they were released due to lack of evidence. Now, when I called the Detective Masterson, he basically indicated to me that he was on the verge of making arrests. There were several pieces of evidence that were collected at the crime scene. You got to remember the time. DNA is very new, and they collected a bunch of evidence, and some of those things were not tested for DNA. So he was pretty certain that this was around 2022 that he was going to make some arrests. And I asked him, I said, can I be there when you make the arrest? Can I take some pictures since I'm the one and asking you about it? Will you give me the exclusive kind of thing? And he's like, yeah, sure. Yeah, no problem. So I waited and I waited. And the DNA came back inconclusive. So I was a little bit disappointed. However, right before he retired, Detective Masterson, he provided me with the whole investigative report, so that was pretty exciting to me. And when I had that, I knew I had a book in my hands. I knew I could write a book about this. That was kind of the moment where I realized this is going to be a book.
Let me ask you this then, because with your background as a reporter, would you agree that it is unusual for a street mugging to have a driver and two guys getting out of the car armed with a gun? Like if you have a driver and a gun and another guy maybe going to a liquor store or something like that, takes a jewelry store, you know what I mean, rather than taking a shot at some guy on the street. What is the background of these three fellows?
They were gang members.
Gotcha.
And,
okay.
They're the alleged murderers. I obviously want to point that out, but they were gang members. They believe this was just a simple robbery homicide. At that time there were a lot of jackings taking place, and police believe this is just one of those types of incidents that took place.
And this guy Nick,
robbery homicide was a big thing in 1995 for sure.
And did he have like a fancy car? And did he look like he had a lot of money on him?
His girlfriend was driving a Mercedes. She had a brand new Mercedes. That he was driving her car. Yeah. And I can also tell you that I interviewed a couple of women. There was a party of 5. I interviewed 2 of them, and they were already at their car. They had just finished eating dinner, and they were actually in the car, and they were noticing these things happening. But as they were walking back to their vehicle, one of the women noticed the 2 men coming at them. And she told her friends, hurry up and get in the vehicle. So they were coming at them first, but when they saw this pretty gold Mercedes come in the parking lot, they did a straight beeline straight for the Mercedes, which really kind of tells you this wasn't some planned, thing. It was just a random robbery homicide.
And you're doing all this from Parker, Arizona, mostly from the VFW bar, right? But
a lot of it either at home or from my office.
I'm just kidding, but the thing is, do you have access to like databases, like professional databases to track these people and track these witnesses down?
I did acquire some background check software, and that really helped me with a lot of the book and finding people and getting phone numbers and interviews, et cetera.
And so then what is the conspiracy theory? Why do people think, what's the alternative theory rather than the one you came up with?
Well, if you go online, there's a lot of stuff about how, you have 2 waiters, they knew each other. There's a lot of suspicion about drug use. And to be honest, early on, my wife and I, we explored that quite a bit, because of the car thing. And so we were in our backyard coming up with different scenario possibilities of what may have happened, and maybe that Ron was the target and not Nicole. We went down that road quite a bit. And that's kind of what led, and that's where Michael Nigg comes in. And, they have to be connected. They were friends, that kind of thing. And there just isn't any truth to it, and I can't, as much as it may sound sexy to some people, it's just not, it's not true, so I'm going that direction.
Gotcha. And you also mentioned another fellow here named Peter Argris.
Yeah, so just like I was saying, when we were going down that road, I thought it would be interesting to see if I could track down some of Ron's friends. I found one named Mike Pincus. I found him on Facebook, and I asked if I could interview him. He wasn't interested. He, politely told me to kick rocks, and And he was nice, but he didn't want to do an interview. And so the next friend, and just so you know, these two friends were identified as best friends by Kim Goldman, the sister. So when they ask her who were his best friends, she says Mike Pincus, and then she says this other guy named Pete Argyris. So I tried to find Pete on social media, and I couldn't. So I did a Google search, and I was just completely shocked at what I found. There was in 2010, well, what I found was a press release from 2015 where a man and his mother are charged in blowing up their own gas station in an insurance fraud scheme, but there was a body inside. So they were both looking at life in prison, basically, and this press release was put out in 2015, but there were no, and there was a couple articles like in the Las Vegas Review-Journal and in the Sun about this, this press release that the DOJ put out, but I couldn't find any articles after that. It was very bizarre that there was no follow-up stories. Well, what happened to him and that kind of thing. I couldn't find anything. The explosion of the gas station, it took place in North Las Vegas in 2010. And the media at that time, they didn't. When they were realized that this Pete guy was a suspect or being charged, nobody made and reasonably so, nobody made the connection between Pete and Ron Goldman. I kind of did it on accident. I think I got lucky in that regard. But his story's pretty amazing. I ended up tracking down the arson investigator in North Las Vegas. He offered to let me come out and interview him. He provided me with his entire investigative report. But before I left, I asked him, well, what obviously I want to know what happened to him, because I'm thinking if he's sitting in a prison cell somewhere, he might be willing to talk about Ron or, whatever, his relationship with Ron or whatever. And he informed me that Pete was dead and that he overdosed on cocaine right before his trial was set to begin. The mother ended up getting 5 years probation.
Yeah, I lived in Vegas in 2010. I'm not familiar with this at all. Now, this dead body...
It was a very small story. There was a body inside, yeah. It wasn't a big story.
Did they place a dead body into a gas station and then burn it in order for an insurance job like a life insurance job on the body too? Or was did they kill this guy with the fire?
The suspicion is that, the story that's out there is that the gentleman that was in the gas station was involved and that he accidentally blew himself up. That Pete and this other guy, his name's Brandon Davis. Brandon was the one that was inside, lighting the place on fire with gasoline. And the story is that that he did it himself. He did it to himself. But I suspect there's more to this story, but I just didn't have the opportunity to go much further. And if I ever write another book, I might do that.
And cocaine overdose is pretty rare too. Okay.
He was a big coke user, and I'm pretty sure he was using at the time of Ron's murders, which is interesting, and the fact that they were best friends, and so that kept me going down that road as well. Sure.
Did you ever look into the work of T.H. Johnson?
I think I have stumbled upon that.
Serpents Rising, somewhere. All that stuff, and then
I saw some stuff on that. Yeah.
He's done a lot of thorough work, and plus he knows all the gossip with these guys because his brother was the doctor for who was the prosecutor, the black guy. Christopher Darden. Yeah. He knows all the baby mama drama in the backgrounds and stuff. There was so much gossip with this. There's so much going on with this bunch. What a crazy whole OJ saga from beginning to end. Just so crazy.
Oh, and it's still going. It's ongoing. Yeah. It never ends. There's some stuff going down right now.
Oh, what do you got?
Well, I don't really. I'm just finding out about it right now. But there's like a court case going on where this Charlie Elric guy is suing the Miami New Times.
Yeah, they tried to set me up for that. They wanted me to do that story about Charlie first, so that I would get sued.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
but I'm a little too sharp for these guys.
It sounds like you made the right call.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you just get that feeling,
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned a name on here. I've never heard this name before, except the name is Tom Lang. We all know Tom Lang, the detective, but now you know another Tom Lang that was a witness. What's the story with that?
Okay, so Tom Lang, it's without an E, and yeah, I obviously, when I was doing the book, I read I have a whole bunch of OJ books, more than I ever wanted to have, but I do have a whole bunch of OJ books, and I was reading F. Lee Bailey's book that he put out right before he died, and in that book, he talks about this witness named Tom Lang, without an E, and he describes him as the most compelling witness of the case who never took the stand, and he was never interviewed by the media. And so I was pretty fascinated by this Tom Lang character, and just like you, I had never heard of him either. And so he talks about how his private investigator, Pat McKenna, you probably know who he is.
Yeah, the audience can go into our archives. We interviewed Pat McKenna.
Oh, okay. He was fun. I interviewed him too. He was fun to interview.
Sharp guy, very sharp. Yeah.
Yeah, and he, I tracked him down and I asked him, if I could interview him, and I didn't want to interview him about the whole OJ case. I was just fascinated by this Tom Lang story. So he's telling me about Tom Lang and what his thoughts about Tom Lang are. And then when I got done with the interview, I was like, man, I really would like to talk to Tom Lang. If anything, that would be the ticket, And so I asked him if he was still around, if he thought he was still alive and whatnot. He said, yeah, he thinks he was living out in Central California somewhere. Well, I'm kind of familiar with that area. So I actually got into my background check software. Now I'm looking for Thomas Lang in California. Well, there's hundreds of them, right? But they're separated by ages. So Pat McKenna had already, after the interview, he sent me a bunch of documents, a bunch of things, everything related to Tom Lang. He basically sent me his whole Tom Lang file. I even have a picture of Tom's dog in the book. So I found him. I found a date of birth on one of those documents, and then I was able to figure out how old he was. And the very first Tom Lang, age 70, that I found, it has their prior addresses. And sure enough, there's an address for 975 South Bundy Drive, which is literally one block down from Nicole. And then I called him, I left messages, and I learned that his wife was a teacher in Tehachapi. They lived in Tehachapi, California, which I'm familiar with. It's kind of out by Bakersfield. And I found the guy, and Amy Lang is the wife, and she's a teacher, so I sent her an email, principal to teacher. I told her what I was trying to do, and then a couple days later, I got a call from Tom Lang, and so I was obviously really excited about that, and I recorded his interview. I haven't talked to him since, but it was pretty amazing story for sure. And I can go into that if you want.
Yeah, we're talking to Brian Wedemeyer. You can find him on Amazon under BT Wedemeyer. The book is OJ's Moon, Untold True Stories from the Other Side. And if you want to meet Brian in person, Brian Wedemeyer, you can go down to the VFW 7061. VFW Post in Parker, Arizona. And he'll buy you a beer. I'm sure he will.
I will.
Then
Indeed.
Tell us, what's the story with Lang?
Okay, so the story is, when I interviewed him, just so you understand, this guy was a very, very successful general contractor. He worked for Fujita Corporation. Fujita was in charge of, basically, they were tasked with rebuilding Los Angeles and the infrastructure after the earthquake. So that they were a big-time engineering firm, and he was their head contractor. He had an office in the Champagne Towers. So, I mean, this guy was no whack job. And when I interviewed him, he sounded very down to earth, a very reasonable person. So I really found him to be very credible when I was talking to him. And the other thing that I liked about him was that he never sought an interview. He never tried to do a book deal like some of the other witnesses did. He really preferred to remain private all these years, so I really appreciated that as well. But he says that he went to Tehachapi, believe it or not. That was one of his first trips to Tehachapi because they were looking for property. Now he has the property out there, but they were there on a weekend getaway. Their daughter was in Anaheim. They got to Anaheim on the way home on Sunday, June 12th. They picked up their daughter, and then they had to decide, do we just stay here, it's late, or do we drive back to Brentwood? They decided to drive back to Brentwood. They get there a little bit before 10 o'clock. Tom decides to walk the dog. The dog's been cooped up in the house all weekend. The wife is unpacking the suitcase, and he insists, he's adamant that when he walks out that door, he sees the clock hit 10 o'clock. He remembers it very, very certainly that it was 10 o'clock when he walked out the door. It takes 3 minutes to walk from his door to the corner up the street north to the corner of Bundy and Dorothy. And he starts to hear some voices as he gets closer to that corner. And then, if you can imagine, so he's walking north up the street on the sidewalk, and he sees some lights coming in his direction, which is not uncommon. He walks his dog around the block all the time. And he always crosses that Dorothy Street because there's only one sidewalk on Dorothy, and it's on Nicole's side of the street. So, but right before he sees these lights coming, and he always tells his dog's name is Zimba, he always tells his dog to stay because and waits to see if the cars are going to turn. When they don't turn and they keep going past him, that's when he tells the dog to go. Now, he's walking his dog without a leash, and he knows that's a big no-no, especially in this neighborhood. But yeah, the dog is very, very well trained. He's very good at giving it commands and things like that. The dog runs across the street, and he always likes to go to this palm tree that's right, basically just a little bit down from Nicole's walkway. There's a palm tree right there, and he always takes a leak right there, if you can imagine that. But as the dog gets closer to the tree, he sees a woman standing behind the tree, behind the open passenger door of what he describes as a white Ford truck vehicle parked right on the curb facing south. There's no parking there, but he's parked there anyway, whoever's parked there. And he doesn't think much of it, but he doesn't want the dog to pee right by this woman's feet. So he calls the dog back, and he starts turning west towards Gretna Green. And as he's walking west, he takes one last look up the sidewalk, and he sees a young man, a white male, standing right in front of Nicole's walkway. He looks angry. Tom says he's got his fist clenched and he looks angry, and Tom figures that he's angry because of the dog, and the dog is not on a leash. And that is pretty much the extent of what he sees. He goes around the block, he goes home, and to me it's fascinating not only what he sees but when. It's nothing that sexy or anything, but the what and the when to me are pivotal in that case, for the whole case. And he never takes the stand.
Yeah, I was going to ask if he took the stand. And is this the guy that was a controversy about him because he said he heard some voices and they were black voices, and there was a whole controversy? How do you know they're black voices? I
think you're thinking of Robert Heidstra, which right. I have a whole chapter about him too. No, it's not Robert Heidstra. This is another dog walker, and that's the other thing too about the whole OJK. There's a lot of dogs. There's a lot of people walking dogs. I always thought that was kind of interesting.
So then, who were the people you think he saw? Ron and Nicole?
So that was my dilemma. Yeah, if it's 10:03, in my mind, That can't be Ron Goldman. There's just no way that I've always had a hard time thinking Ron could be there when Marcia Clark says the murders happened at 10:15. I didn't think he had enough time to walk all the way home, change his clothes, shower, get something to eat, etc., and then drive all the way to Nicole. Well, it's not all the way; it's 3 minutes, but it's a 5-minute walk to his apartment. It's a 3-minute drive, and then he's got to get changed. I just didn't think he had enough time to do all those things and be there by 10:15. There was no way you were going to convince me that he could be there by 10:03, and that really was a struggle for me. That really told me at that time that either these are two completely different people that aren't OJ, or at the very least, OJ's not alone. So I was stuck on that for a long time, and my opinion begins to evolve towards the end of my journey. So I don't want to give away everything, but I do have an opinion on who that man is standing on the sidewalk at 10:03.
Now, he said he saw like a white SUV type truck. Nicole drove a Jeep Grand Cherokee. Was her Jeep white?
No, I think that was like a light brown, if I remember correctly. Yeah, no, it wasn't white. Mm-mm.
Well, but then who do you think he saw?
Well, I think he saw Ron Goldman. Oh. After all that's said and done, and my theory is that I believe Ron Goldman went there twice. I believe that he knew that Nicole was waiting for him. He was on his way to go out, and he didn't want to. It was already 10 o'clock-ish. It was going to be after 10. She had a big, long day. She was exhausted. Her kids are at the house. I think, and if he walks straight there, which is kind of a shorter distance for him than to walk to his apartment, then he has to double back and walk all the way back past Mezzaluna and then back to his apartment. I think that he walked home, got in his car or in Andrea's car, and then drove over, and he sees the same white vehicle that Tom Lang sees, but he also sees Nicole standing out front. And I think that he probably sees that as an opportunity to give her the glasses, but then he realizes they're probably arguing at the time, and maybe this isn't a good time for him to be there, and so he turns around and maybe motions to her or gives something to her like, I'll be back in a little while or something like that, and then he goes home. That's basically what I think happened. Tom Lang says the man that he sees on the sidewalk was wearing dark clothing. When Ron's murdered, he's not wearing dark clothing, but if you follow my theory, then he's still in his waiter's uniform, which would be dark clothing. The real interesting thing was, I think he left the Mezzaluna around 9:55. It's a 5-minute walk to his apartment. It's a 3-minute drive. That's 8 minutes, right? So you go 9:55 plus 8. That puts him on that sidewalk at 10:03 when Tom Lang sees somebody standing there.
And who would the white truck be then? That would be OJ's truck?
I think it was OJ, yeah. And for the longest time, I was really struggling with that.
That's interesting. And Tom Lang, because he's seen pictures of Ron Goldman now. Does he say, "Well, that's definitely Ron Goldman," or he's still not sure?
He thinks he saw Ron Goldman, yeah.
And he thinks he saw Nicole.
He thinks he saw Nicole. He even says that he recognized Nicole because Nicole liked to drive fast down the alley. They shared the same alley.
Gotcha.
That runs parallel with Bundy, and he actually goes. His entrance to his house is actually through that alley. He doesn't have access through the front of the house, not by car anyway.
Well, what about all these theories you hear about drug dealers? They showed up at OJ's house and they said, "Okay, we're going to go collect the money from Nicole." Could have been them, right?
Well, I think anything's possible. The interesting theory that I heard recently was that about this Charlie thing is they kind of put him there at 10:03 as well. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I'm going with what I have in the book.
I gotcha. And then, what is your conclusion? Then, what did you come up with? Just the plain old motive. OJ was jealous, and he went down there and stabbed her up.
Well, I think that when you think about him being there twice, I think it's very possible that they were already, OJ and Nicole were already having a bad day, obviously, and they were arguing. And I think it's very possible that Ron's arrival at first time is maybe what triggered everything. So if you think about, okay, so maybe I think both Marcia Clark and Petrocelli are correct. A lot of people don't realize that you have two attorneys, Marcia Clark and Daniel Petrocelli, in the civil trial. You have two people both trying to get OJ, and they both say the murders happened 25 minutes apart. Marcia Clark says they happened at 10:15. Daniel Petrocelli says they happened at 10:40. That's a 25-minute difference in a very tight window of time. And I really struggled with that. However, if you go with the theory that I have in the book, and it's just a theory, I'm not trying to say it's gospel, but if you go with that theory, if Ron's first arrival triggers OJ and then he drives around to the back parking lot, and now you have one murder happening at 10:15, and then while she's getting murdered, Ron's getting ready back at his apartment. He arrives back. He sees that there's no white vehicle in front anymore, so he probably figures OJ's gone. But what he doesn't realize is now OJ's parked in the back of the apartment or the condo, and so he probably figures it's okay. Well, he walks up, and that's when the second murder happens, and that's probably when Robert Heidstra hears the hey 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 of a younger voice followed by a deeper voice. That's what he testifies to.
Yeah, I could almost see, too, going along with this theory that if OJ, if the waiter comes by to drop off the glasses, whatever, and OJ sees him, and he's still arguing with Nicole, and then suddenly the guy comes back like 5-10 minutes later, it would be like, what the hell is he doing back? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a bridge too far, bro. What are you doing back here?
Right.
And that would flip you out.
Right. I think that Ron probably I think he walked up and he saw the mess and he probably, it's very quiet and it's dark, and I would imagine OJ probably heard him pull up the second time. He parks on Dorothy. He actually turns on Dorothy and parks right there on Dorothy. He doesn't go quite as far as going into the alley, so he doesn't see the Bronco. But I'm pretty sure, based on the theory, that OJ probably hears Ron pull in, park the car, the door close. He probably hears him walking closer and closer to the gate. That's when I think he probably gets ready to rush Ron because he realizes he's in trouble, and that's probably when the second murder takes place. I've always had a problem with both murders happening at the same time. That was always an issue for me as well.
I had Bill Deere on the show recently, right before he died, and he's telling me he has some other witness, some new witness, top secret witness. I think the guy was a private investigator too, he was saying. Do you have any news about that? You hear anything on the grapevine about that?
I saw something on television about that. I don't have a whole lot of information on that. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. So what else, other top secret new info you got in this book here, OJ's Moon, Untold Stories from the Other Side?
Well, those are the three main stories. So you got Michael, Pete, and Tom, and I stick with those three stories for the most part. There's a couple side stories that are pretty fascinating. The real fascinating thing to me is what happens to Tom after and why he never takes the stand and some of those things that take place. F. Lee Bailey really wanted to put him on the stand, but and in fact, he says in his book that was really the only time he had an argument with Johnny Cochran was over Tom Lang. And if you watch the trial very closely, I mean really closely, there are references to Tom Lang. There was a discovery battle, and they made a motion to Judge Ito because they felt that the prosecutor was withholding some of the information related to Tom Lang, and if you blink, you miss it, which is really interesting, But he actually tells me in the interview that he actually shows up at the court one day. He got paged by Robert Shapiro, and he actually shows up, and they escort him upstairs, and he's telling me all about that. And then he goes and they ask him to sit down up at the defense table. He's actually sitting there at the table, and the really odd thing is that the other Tom Lang had just testified, and they were at a recess. So they were literally possibly at a point of having Tom Lang followed by Tom Lang, which is just bizarre. And the book is full of all kinds of bizarre coincidences, by the way. I mean,
it's so true. And there's so many weird coincidences in this story, man. Like the Scientologist pastor who married Marcia Clark used to go play poker with OJ. Just one crazy thing after another.
Pete's ex-girlfriend, I found her because in that report from the arson investigation in Las Vegas, I found Pete's ex-girlfriend. So I was asking her, did he ever talk about Ron Goldman or blah? And she gave me some comments. And then I realized, well, if Ron knew Michael Nigg, maybe Pete knew Michael Nigg. So I asked her if she heard Pete ever talk about Michael Nigg. And she said, well, no, but I know about Michael Nigg. And I was like, well, that's weird. And she literally, after Julie, Michael Nigg's girlfriend, after Michael was murdered, she ends up moving at some point to Las Vegas and becomes roommates with Pete's ex-girlfriend. Total coincidence.
Wow.
I was just floored by that. Yeah.
Well, we got about 6 minutes left. Any other little stories you want to share with us?
Well, there is a cool thing about the Michael Nigg case, and I think there could be some answers there somewhere. But the whole reason why this case got reopened is because of a woman named Stacy. Stacy lives in Fairfax, Virginia, and she is actually pretty well known in the national media because there was a big story. It got all over the news at the time. She was upset about some contents that were found in her high school son's library books. There was some stuff about she was upset because there was some sexually graphic type things in these books, and she goes to the Virginia or the Fairfax school board and starts reading all the stuff that's in this book, and they're trying to get her to stop, and it's a big thing at this meeting, and the video of the meeting goes viral, and then they end up interviewing her. She's on Fox News and all that stuff. Well, there's this Stacy that's in the Michael Nigg report, and I realized that she's the one that called LAPD because in the Michael Nigg case, you have to stay with me here.
I'm with you.
In the Michael Nigg case, she is mugged 30 minutes before Michael Nigg is murdered. They take her purse, they rip it off her. She's on by Melrose, which is the next big street up, and they find her purse at the Michael Nigg crime scene, and they end up interviewing her and so on. Well, a couple years ago, she was really interested in what happened to Michael Nigg. So she goes on and for the first time ever starts searching Michael Nigg. And on that, she reads the same Wikipedia thing that I read, and she sees that there were suspects that were arrested and later released due to lack of evidence. She did not know that. And she was very, very upset that no one ever called her when they arrested those suspects because she felt like she could have identified them. And so when I call her she thinks that I'm calling her when I tell her I'm writing a book. She thinks I'm calling about this high school library book controversy. And I said, actually, no, ma'am, I'm calling you about a homicide that took place in Hollywood in 1995, and I'm thinking you might know something about it. And then she just paused and said, she's like, I've been waiting for this call my whole life. Yes, wow. Absolutely. So I interviewed her, yeah. Another
Did she have
weird
anything
coincidence.
to contribute?
Well, I was hoping that once she looked at the photos of the suspects, she couldn't make she wasn't able to go there. She couldn't make a positive identification. No.
Okay, well,
just too many years have passed by.
Oh yeah, tell me about that. Yeah, it's amazing. Your memory just will change all the facts. So we only got a couple minutes left. What do you want to leave us with?
Well, what I'm really hoping for is I'm really hoping for people like you and other folks that have a lot more resources and expertise than I do. I'm really hoping that someone will pick up the book and really take interest in Michael Nigg's case. My ultimate dream is for somebody to care about Michael Nigg enough to solve his murder. I think his murder is just as important as the other murders, and I think it's a shame that the only energy that people put into the Michael Nigg case is to determine whether or not there's some conspiracy with the OJ case, and I'm hoping somebody is going to tackle the Michael Nigg case and solve that murder. At the very least, read the book and remember something, or remember somebody talking or something along those lines, and then hopefully get justice for his family and his friends, who, by the way, are very, very private because of all the allegations of the drug stuff and everything. It was very difficult for me to talk to anybody who knew Michael Nigg. I did talk to a few, but it was very difficult. They're very unhappy with the things that are out there as it relates to Michael Nigg.
And you're so right. His life is just as precious as Ron and Nicole or anybody else who's died in this.
And he was killed.
Yeah.
He was killed for nothing. He took right before they pulled in the parking lot. They went to an ATM. He pulled out $40.
Yeah.
When they searched the car, they found the $40. They didn't get anything. So he was killed for literally no reason. He was shot in the head, cowardly, and just an awful thing to happen for anybody.
We've been talking to Brian Wedemeyer, Principal Wedemeyer, you might want to call him.
That's right.
And on Amazon, it goes under BT Wedemeyer. The book is OJ's Moon, Untold Stories from the Other Side. There's a Facebook page, too. We can get right a hold of Brian right away. OJ's Moon, Untold Stories, Untold True Stories from the Other Side on Facebook. You can meet him in person at the VFW down there at 7061. Catch him before he gets that third or fourth beer. Otherwise, he'll tuck your ear off. I got to tell you about this book, though. Brian,
Is that what I'm doing now?
No, man, this is great.
Kind of,
I got to tell you this. I would recommend this book because Mr. Wedemeyer, we just met, but he's a very sober guy, all joking aside, very sober in his investigative technique here. I don't think he has an agenda at all. This is all new information. I've never heard any of this stuff. So whatever your opinions are, whatever you're working on with this case here, this is all new information to throw into the mix here, and it shouldn't be overlooked. OJ's Moon, Untold True Stories from the Other Side, BT Wedemeyer. What are you working on next? Another OJ thing or something all different?
I got a couple ideas. Some things this OJ thing doesn't go away, so it's possible I could go down this road again, maybe make another trip over to the moon on the other side. But right now I'm just focusing on school, and school just started a couple days ago, so I'm trying to get my kids ready for school.
Gotcha. Maybe the next one will be OJ's son about Darnell over there. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
Co-writer with Bill Deere. Thank you so much, Brian. Thank you so much. Good night.
My pleasure. Thank you.